Let me ask you something. Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and the government has decided that the war that's been happening for the past decade, the one you've seen on the news, the one you've talked about at dinner, the one your friends have argued about, never happened. There was no war. There was a different war with a different enemy. And if you dare to say, but I remember the other one, you are mentally ill, possibly dangerous, a criminal. Now imagine that's not a hypothetical. That's just Tuesday. That's the world of 1984, written in 1948 by a dying man named Eric Arthur Blair, better known by his pen name George Orwell. This novel has haunted every generation since it was published in 1949. Orwell died of tuberculosis just 7 months after it came out. He was 46 years old. He never saw the enormous impact his final book would have on history, language, and the very way human beings think about power. The words he invented are now in our daily vocabulary. Big Brother, Doublethink, Newspeak, Fuck Crime, Room 111, I'm person. You've heard these words, you probably use them. And now you're about to understand exactly where they came from and why they still matter more than ever. This is a complete story of Winston Smith, a man who dared to remember, a man who dared to feel, and a world that wanted to destroy him for it. Pardon the world. Oceania, 1984. Welcome to the worst place on earth. The year is 1984. The place is London, except London doesn't really exist anymore. It's been renamed Airstrip 1, and it's the third most populous province of a massive superstate called Oceania. The first image of the book is unforgettable. A cold April morning, clocks are striking 13. That's the first clue that something is deeply wrong with this world. The second clue arrives immediately after. Every wall, every building, every corner is plastered with a poster, an enormous face, a man with a heavy black mustache staring directly at you. Beneath the face, 4 words. Big Brother is watching you. This is the world of Oceania. Let's understand it properly, because once you do, everything that happens next will hit much harder. The idea of the government. The party in its 4 ministries, Oceania, is run by the party, and the party is divided into 2 layers. The inner party is the elite, roughly 2% of the population, who live in relative luxury, have real coffee, real food, and can even turn off their telescreens. The outer party is the middle class of the regime, bureaucrats, workers, enforcers, people like our protagonist. They live in crumbling flats, eat synthetic food, drink terrible Victory gin, and are watched every second of every day. Then there are the proles, the working masses, about 85% of the population. They live in poverty in the slums, mostly ignored by the party, who considers them too dull and animalistic to be a threat. The pros have no telescreens in their homes they can buy on the black market. They can even have romantic relationships without approval. They are free in the way that livestock in a field is free to roam, but watch from a distance and corral whenever needed. The party has 4 great ministries, and they are breathtaking in their hypocrisy. The Ministry of Truth, miniature in Newspeak. Its job? To spread lies, to rewrite history, to make the past agree with whatever the party is currently saying. Winston Smith works here. The Ministry of Peace, Minipax. Its job? To wage war. Oceania is always at war. Oceania is always at war. The Ministry of Peace manages and glorifies that war. The Ministry of Love, Manu. Its job? To torture and punish. This is the most feared building in London. It has no windows. It is surrounded by barbed wire, steel doors, and machine gun nests. It is where dissidents go in and where broken shells of human beings come out, if they come out at all. The Ministry of Plenty, Mini Plenty. Its job? To manage scarcity, to ration food, clothes, razor blades, everything, and then announce triumphantly that production has increased. People who were just told their chocolate ration is being reduced to 20 grams per week will, 24 hours later, cheer wildly that it has been increased to 20 grams. On the wall of the Ministry of Truth, a gleaming pyramidal building 300 meters tall. 3 slogans are written in elegant letters. War is peace, freedom, and slavery, ignorance is strength. These are not just propaganda. They are the philosophical foundations of the entire regime. We'll come back to why. Here we get a telescreen. The eye that never closes. In every home, every office, every corridor, every public space, there is a telescreen. It looks like a television set, but it works in both directions simultaneously. It broadcasts party propaganda constantly, but it also watches and listens to you. You cannot turn it off. You can only dim it slightly. There is no way to know if you're being watched at any given moment. Maybe the thought police are watching you right now. Maybe they're not. The point is, you can never be sure. So you behave as if you're being watched at all times. Every muscle in your face, every expression, every muttered word under your breath, all of it could betray you. Even your face can get you arrested. In Newspeak, there is a word for it: face crime, the crime of wearing an expression that reveals your true feelings. Surprise when a victory is announced, a flicker of doubt during a speech, a moment's hesitation at the 2 minutes hate. These things can get you killed. The big party's greatest weapons. Before we meet Winston Smith, we need to understand the 3 tools the party uses to maintain absolute control over human minds. These are not physical weapons. They are far more dangerous than that. Weeping on Newspeak, the party is actively shrinking the English language. Every year, hundreds of words are removed from the dictionary. The project is overseen by linguists like Winston's colleague Sam, who works on the 11th edition of the Newspeak dictionary with genuine, almost fanatical enthusiasm. The logic is elegant and horrifying. If you don't have the word for a concept, you cannot think it. The word freedom is being eliminated. The word rebellion is being eliminated. The word honor, gone. The word science, gone. In its place, a stripped-down, blunt language designed to make complex, subversive thought literally impossible. Bad becomes ungood. Very bad becomes double plus ungood. The entire emotional and philosophical spectrum of human experience compressed into a few hundred words. By 2050, Simon explains cheerfully, nobody alive will be able to understand a conversation like the one they are having right now. The revolution will be complete. Not when it destroys the body, but when it destroys the mind's capacity to even formulate resistance. Winston listens to Simon talk about this with a cold, sinking feeling, and then he thinks Simon will be vaporized. He's too intelligent. He sees too clearly. The party doesn't want people who understand Newspeak. It wants people who just speak it. Sure enough, a few weeks later, Simon disappears. His name is removed from every list, every record. He never existed. Even to Doublethink. This is perhaps the most disturbing concept in the entire novel because it is the most psychologically sophisticated. Doublethink is the ability to hold 2 completely contradictory beliefs simultaneously and to fully believe both of them. It's not just lying. It's not even just believing a lie. It's the ability to know that something is a lie and also genuinely believe it is the truth at the same time, without any sense of contradiction. The party can announce that chocolate rations are being reduced, and the very next day announce that chocolate rations have been generously increased. And the people of Oceania will genuinely, sincerely believe both statements. They will cheer at the increase. They will not remember the reduction because they will have erased that memory using doublethink. Winston understands doublethink intellectually, which is why he is dangerous. He cannot stop himself from remembering. And in Oceania, memory is a crime. Weapon 3, the mutability of the past. The party's control over history is total. Every newspaper, every book, every magazine, every photograph, every film, all of it can be and regularly is revised, corrected, updated, and reissued. Winston's entire job at the Ministry of Truth is to rewrite old newspaper articles so that whatever Big Brother said in the past matches what is happening now. If Big Brother predicted that the South India Front would be quiet, and it wasn't, Winston rewrites the article so that Big Brother predicted exactly what happened. If a chocolate ration was promised and then cut, Winston rewrites the old promise so the promise never existed. If a high-ranking official falls from grace and becomes an unperson, Winston removes their name from every article they ever appeared in and invents fictional people to replace them. The original documents are then dropped into memory holes, slots in every wall that lead to enormous furnaces where the originals are incinerated. History is not recorded. History is manufactured daily to serve the present. Winston knows this, he does it, and it terrifies him because it means there's no solid ground anywhere. The only truth that exists is the truth inside his own skull. And even that, the party is trying to reach. The 2 minutes hate and the characters we meet every morning at the ministry, all party members gather for the 2 minutes hate. A mandatory 2-minute session during which a recording of Emmanuel Goldstein is played on the telescreen. Goldstein is the party's great enemy. He is a bearded, bespectacled man with a sheep-like quality to his face and voice, and he is the supposed head of a secret underground resistance called the Brotherhood. He may or may not be real, no one is quite sure, but he appears on the telescreen regularly to give long, passionate speeches about democracy, freedom, and the betrayal of the revolution. And then the room goes insane. Everyone screams, shouts, hurls abuse at the screen. They shake their fists. They throw things. A woman picks up a heavy Newspeak dictionary and hurls it at Goldstein's face on the screen. Within 30 seconds, even people who know perfectly well what they're doing find themselves caught up in the howling, screaming, stamping fury of it all. The rage is not voluntary. It is automatic. The telescreen generates it, and the crowd feeds it back, and for 2 minutes the room is a scene of collective hysteria that would be comical if it weren't so frightening. Winston goes through the motions. He screams with the rest of them. But inside, he notices something about himself. During those 2 minutes, his hatred keeps sliding sideways. Sometimes he hates Goldstein. Sometimes, in a quick, terrifying flash, he hates Big Brother. And he snaps back. Then he loves Big Brother again. Then he hates the dark-haired girl sitting behind him, a young, athletic woman who wears the red sash of the Junior Anti-Sex League and looks like the most committed true believer in the room. And at the end of the 2 minutes hate, Winston catches the eye of O'Brien. O'Brien is a large, burly member of the inner party, with a blunt, intelligent face and an air of quiet authority. He's physically intimidating, but somehow also charming. There's a warmth in his manner that doesn't match his position. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, Winston and O'Brien exchange a glance. And in that glance, Winston feels something he has never felt before: recognition. The sense that O'Brien is thinking exactly what he is thinking, that they are secretly on the same side. He might be wrong, but hope is a powerful thing. Meet Winston Smith, the most dangerous man in Oceania, and not because he's strong. Winston Smith is 39 years old. He lives in a crumbling flat in Victory Mansions, a building that smells of boiled cabbage and old rags. He has a varicose ulcer on his ankle that itches constantly. He drinks Victory Gin, a colorless, oily liquid that tastes like nitric acid and hits like a rubber club to the back of the head. He smokes Victory cigarettes whose tobacco falls out if you hold him upright. He is not a hero. He is not brave physically. He is not strong. He is not handsome. He is thin, pale, and perpetually tired. What makes him dangerous is the one thing the party has not been able to reach: his memory and his ability to feel that the world is wrong. Winston knows deep in his bones that things were different before. He can almost remember a time, childhood before the revolution, when the sky was a different color, when people laughed differently, when love between a man and a woman was not an act of rebellion. He can't prove it. All the records have been rewritten. But he remembers his mother's face and the warmth of it and the tenderness. And that warmth feels like proof of something the party cannot erase. One day, Winston commits the first act of open rebellion that the book describes. He goes home from work, sits in the blind spot of his telescreen, and opens a beautiful old notebook with creamy paper, purchased secretly from an antique shop in a Prole neighborhood. He dips an old pen in ink, and he begins to write. He doesn't know who he's writing for. Maybe the future. Maybe nobody. But writing feels like an act of faith, a declaration that something happened, and I experienced it, and it was real. And no one can take that from me. His first entry is barely coherent. He writes about a propaganda film he watched the night before, war footage that had the audience roaring with laughter as refugees were blown apart. He writes about the 2 minutes hate. He writes without quite meaning to, in large childish letters. Down with Big Brother over and over, filling half a page. He stares at what he's written. His hands are shaking. He knows, he has always known, that this is the end, that from this moment he is already a dead man. The thought police will find him eventually. His diary will be discovered. He will be arrested in the night, taken to the Ministry of Love, and turned into an unperson. But he goes on writing anyway because he thinks the thought police will get me whether I write or not. At least this way something existed. At least this way there was a moment when a human being said, "I'm here, this is real. 2 + 2 = 4. Victor V. Winston's work. The art of lying for a living Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth is, in the novel's most darkly funny detail, called rectification. He rectifies old newspaper articles and historical records so they agree with current party reality. He is very good at it, better than most, because he has a genuine creative mind. When a high party official named Comrade Withers falls from grace and becomes an unperson, Winston doesn't simply delete him from old articles. He invents a completely new person, Comrade Ogilvy, a fictional heroic party member who dies gloriously in battle. And he writes Comrade Ogilvy into the historical record so convincingly that within days, Comrade Ogilvy will be as real as anyone who ever lived. As Winston himself reflects, you could create dead men but not living ones. Comrade Ogilvy, who never existed, now exists in the past permanently, just as authentically as Julius Caesar. This is the world's most sophisticated form of lying, and Winston is one of its best practitioners, which is, of course, precisely why he is so dangerous when he begins to rebel. Remember Winston's private thoughts. Prose and hope as Winston walks through London in his off hours, wandering through the gray, bombed-out streets. He thinks constantly about the prose, the working-class masses who live in the slums. He writes in his diary, "If there is hope, it lies in the prose. The prose are 85% of the population. They are enormous, ungoverned, and largely ignored by the party. They gamble, they drink, they fight over saucepans at the market, they sing songs in the street. The party dismisses them as animals too stupid to be a threat. But Winston sees something the party has missed. The pros have preserved something the party has destroyed in everyone else. They still feel things. Naturally, without calculation. They love each other, they mourn their dead, they laugh without being told to. They are, in Winston's most poignant observation, more human than the human members of the party. One evening, Winston visits a pub in the pro neighborhood and tries to interview an old man about what life was like before the revolution, hoping to find some concrete proof that the past the party describes as a lie. But the old man's memory is just a heap of personal anecdotes about beer prices and boat races and his sister-in-law's funeral. He can't give Winston the grand historical comparison he's looking for. Winston walks away, dejected. But on the same walk, he finds himself standing outside a little antique shop, the same one where he bought his diary. He goes inside. The shopkeeper, a gentle, bespectacled old man named Mr. Charrington, shows him around, and Winston finds a beautiful glass paperweight with a piece of coral preserved inside. The paperweight captivates him. It is a fragment of the past, a beautiful, useless, utterly real object, a little chunk of history they forgot to alter, as he'll later describe it to Julia. He buys it, and upstairs Mr. Charrington shows him a real room, furnished simply with an old fireplace, an old clock, a large bed, no telescreen. The thought drifts through Winston's mind, half-formed, terrifying. What if this room could be a hiding place? He pushes it away. But it stays in the back of his mind. Julia, the love story that is also a revolution. It begins with a piece of paper. One morning at the ministry, as Winston is walking down a corridor, the dark-haired girl from the fiction department, the one he thought was a spy, the one he briefly considered killing, stumbles and falls in front of him. He helps her up, and as she rises, she presses something small into his hand, a scrap of paper folded into a square. Winston spends the next several hours unable to look at it. Every possible interpretation crowds his mind. It's a trap. It's a message from the thought police. It's a summons. He's already dead. Finally, at his desk, surrounded by the noise of the ministry, he unfolds it. He reads 4 words. I love you. The effect on Winston is almost impossible to describe. It's not romantic excitement, not yet. It's closer to a kind of profound, confused gratitude. The feeling of a man dying of thirst who suddenly finds water and isn't sure if it's real. Her name, he eventually discovers, is Julia. She is 26 years old. She works in the fiction department, maintaining the machines that generate party novels. She is athletic, practical, sharp, and funny. She has been breaking party rules for years, carefully, cleverly, invisibly, and has never been caught because she is far more street smart than Winston. Or Winston rebels with his mind, with his diary, his thoughts, his intellectual despair. Julia rebels with her body. She sneaks real food. She wears perfume secretly. She has had multiple affairs with party members. She doesn't care much about politics or the grand sweep of history. She cares about living, about joy, about pleasure, about feeling human. She is, in her own way, as much a revolutionary as Winston, just a very different kind. The 2 of them fall in love, and the love story is beautiful precisely because of how dangerous every step of it is. Their first meeting requires weeks of planning and careful choreography. Winston sees her in the canteen and they exchange a few whispered words without ever looking at each other, like spies operating in enemy territory. She gives him directions to a hidden spot in the countryside, a sunlit woodland clearing where they can meet, far from telescreens and patrols. Their first encounter there is tender and a little clumsy. Julia is practical. Winston is overwhelmed. He tells her honestly that before her note, he hated her and had even considered killing her. She laughs with delight. It's the best proof he could give her that he's genuinely one of them. Julia brings real chocolate from the black market. They lie in the grass among bluebells. For the first time in years, Winston feels something close to happiness. Over the following months, they meet as often as they can, always in different places, always carefully. A bombed-out church tower, street markets where they pretend not to know each other, brief whispered conversations on moving pavements. They're exhilaratingly, terrifyingly alive. And then Winston remembers the room above Mr. Charrington's shop. The room above the shop. Winston rents the room from Mr. Charrington. It is a beautiful, stupid, suicidal decision. Both he and Julia know it, but they can't help themselves. The room becomes their sanctuary. It has no telescreen. Behind the curtains, they exist in a bubble of reality that feels almost like the world that was. Julia brings stolen their party coffee. Real coffee. Thick and rich smelling, something Winston hasn't tasted in years. She brings real sugar, real white bread, real jam, real tea. She wears a dress instead of party overalls. She puts on makeup, another crime, another act of rebellion, another declaration that her body belongs to her. She wears perfume. Winston looks at her and feels something he struggles to put into words. It is not just desire. It is the sense that her existence is itself a refutation of the party. That a young woman who laughs, who wears a dress, who eats chocolate, and makes love and chooses her own life, is a walking act of defiance against a system that wants all of that to be impossible. They talk for hours in that room. They talk about their lives, their fears, the world as it is and as it might have been. They listen to a poor woman in the courtyard below who sings old songs while hanging laundry. They watch the light change through the muslin curtains. They sleep and wake up, and it feels miraculous. Through their conversations, we learn more about both of them. Julia is practical about the party. She doesn't believe in any grand underground resistance, doesn't particularly care about Goldstein or the Brotherhood, thinks the whole thing is probably made up. She's not interested in the future of humanity. She's interested in today and the next hour and the small pleasures that keep a person sane. Winston, by contrast, is haunted by the big picture. He needs to understand the why of it all. He needs to believe that what they're doing matters in some historical sense beyond the two of them. One night, lying in the dark, Winston says something quietly devastating. "We are the dead." Julia says, "Not yet." He says, "But sooner or later, yes, they'll get us. It's inevitable. The question is only when." And Julia, practical to the end. "Then stop talking about it and come here." Now, Brennan, the Brotherhood, the trap that looks like hope. Winston has never stopped thinking about O'Brien. That moment during the 2 minutes hate, that fraction of a second exchange of glances, has stayed with him like a splinter in his brain. O'Brien, with his intelligence and his quiet dignity, seems like someone who might have secret doubts, who might, underneath the black overalls and the inter-party privileges, be one of them. One day in the corridor, O'Brien approaches Winston and strikes up a conversation about Newspeak, of all things, complimenting Winston on an article he'd written. It's a brief, perfectly ordinary conversation. But at the end, O'Brien slips Winston his home address, framed as an invitation to look at a new Newspeak dictionary. It is, of course, not about the dictionary. Winston knows what this means, or he thinks he does. And eventually, he and Julia visit O'Brien at his apartment in the inter-party section of London. The apartment itself is intimidating, clean, spacious, softly lit, filled with the smell of good food and good tobacco. O'Brien greets him with grave courtesy, waves away his servant, and then does something extraordinary. He walks to the telescreen and turns it off. Winston had never imagined such a thing was possible. "You can turn it off," he says. "Yes," says O'Brien. "You have that privilege." And then they begin. O'Brien acknowledges everything. Yes, the Brotherhood exists. Yes, Goldstein is real. The existence is real. He gives Winston and Julia a kind of oath, a list of things they are prepared to do. To kill, to lie, to spread diseases, to betray, to commit crimes that would fill Winston with horror, all in service of destroying the party. The questions are calm, methodical, almost catechistic. You are prepared to give your lives? Yes. You are prepared to commit murder? Yes. You are prepared to separate and never see each other again? A pause. "No," says Winston finally. And Julia, "No." O'Brien notes this. "It is," he says, "important to know everything." He gives Winston a copy of the book, Goldstein's manifesto, titled "The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism." This is the forbidden text, the explanation of everything, the compendium of all heresies that the party burns wherever it finds it. What the book reveals, why the world is the way it is. Winston reads the book in the sanctuary of the room above the shop, with Julia sleeping beside him, and what it tells him is both illuminating and shattering. The book explains the structure of society across all of history. There are always three groups: the high, who rule; the middle, who want to replace the high; and the low, who want equality for all. Revolutions happen when the middle convinces the low to join them in overthrowing the high, and then once in power, the middle becomes the new high, and the cycle begins again. What the party did, what makes it different from every previous ruling class, that it figured this out and deliberately broke the cycle. The way to keep power forever is not to rule for a reason. Previous tyrants always justified their rule for God, for country, for progress, for the good of the people. The party does not. The party rules for the sake of ruling. Power is not a means to an end. Power is the end. The perpetual war between Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia isn't about victory. Nobody expects to win the war. The war exists to consume surplus resources so people can't get too comfortable, to provide a constant state of fear so people are easy to control, and to give the population an enemy to direct its hatred toward. The enemy doesn't even need to be real, as long as people believe in it. The book explains why the Ministry of Truth rewrites history, not just to prevent embarrassment, but because truth itself is the enemy. If there is a fixed objective reality, if 2 plus 2 definitely equals 4, regardless of what the party says, then the party's power is limited. But if reality itself can be controlled, if the human mind can be trained to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5 when the party requires it, then the party's power is truly unlimited. Winston reads all of this with a mixture of recognition and despair. He understands how the machine works now. But the book doesn't answer the question that has always haunted him most. Why? Not how, why? What is the point of having power if all you do with it is oppress and torture and control? He never gets to find out from the book because something terrible happens before he reaches that chapter. Into part 3. The trap springs. You are the dead. It is a hot June evening. Winston and Julia are lying in a room above the shop, relaxed for once, comfortable, almost forgetting to be afraid. Outside, the prole woman in the courtyard is singing an old love song. Julia half dozes. Winston lies looking at the ceiling. He says lazily, "We are the dead." Julia says, "We are the dead." And then a third voice from behind the picture on the wall says, "You are the dead." The voice is metallic and cold. The picture falls from the wall, and behind it is a telescreen. They have been watched. The entire time, every visit to the room, every conversation, every moment of tenderness, all of it was recorded and heard and seen. The doors smash open. Men in black uniforms pour into the room. Winston and Julia are seized and thrown against the walls. A boot crashes into Winston's varicose ulcer. He hears Julia make a sound, a single grunt of pain, as she is hit. And then old Mr. Phil Charrington, the gentle, bespectacled shopkeeper, steps forward. His face is different. Younger, more alert. The stoop is gone. The soft voice is gone. He is not the kindly old widower at all. He is a member of the thought police, probably in his mid-30s, who has been playing a role this entire time. The room above the shop was never a sanctuary. It was a trap. The Brotherhood was a trap. O'Brien was a trap. The book was a trap. The resistance that Winston poured his hopes into, all of it from the very beginning, designed to identify, isolate, and finally capture people exactly like Winston Smith. The Ministry of Love, the place where there is no darkness. Winston is taken to the Ministry of Love. The windowless building, the one place in London that no one enters except on official business. He is put in a cell with no darkness. The lights burn constantly. This is the place where there is no darkness that O'Brien mentioned in that long ago dream. And he waits. He has no idea how long he waits. Time loses meaning. He loses weight. He is hungry and thirsty and terrified. Other prisoners come and go around him. Some are obviously guilty of real crimes. Some, like him, are guilty only of thinking the wrong thoughts. He watches a man named Amplefort, a poet from the Ministry of Truth, brought in for leaving the word God in a Kipling translation because he couldn't find a rhyme. He watches his neighbor Parsons, the cheerful, sweaty, true believer from Victory Mansions, dragged in because his daughter denounced him to the thought police after overhearing him mutter something in his sleep. Parsons is proud of her for it. And then O'Brien walks through the door. Winston's heart leaps. For one pathetic, humiliating instant, he thinks O'Brien has come to rescue him. O'Brien looks at him with an expression that is almost sad, almost affectionate, and says, "They got me a long time ago." He doesn't mean that he was also caught. He means he was never on Winston's side. He has been a dedicated agent of the party this entire time. He watched Winston for 7 years, noticed the first stirrings of rebellion, let them grow, nurture them carefully, and then engineer the entire progression from the diary to Julia, to the room above the shop, to the Brotherhood, to this exact moment. He is in a terrible way the architect of Winston's destruction, and now his work can begin properly, because what the party wants from Winston is not his confession, not his punishment, not even his death, at least not yet. What the party wants from Winston is his genuine love. The 3 stages of rank-creation O'Brien explains with the calm patience of a doctor discussing a course of treatment, that there are 3 stages to what Winston will undergo. Stage 1. Learning. Winston will be tortured until he confesses to everything. Every thought crime, every meeting, every word in the diary, all of it must be acknowledged and surrendered. Stage 2. Understanding. Winston will understand why the party is right. Not just say the words. Understand it. Believe it. Stage 3. Acceptance. Winston will genuinely, completely, from the bottom of his soul, love Big Brother. The torture begins. Orwell does not spare us the details, but what matters more than the physical suffering is the psychological dimension. O'Brien conducts Winston's treatment with something that almost resembles genuine care, the way a devoted surgeon might care about his patient. He asks Winston questions. He listens to his answers. He acknowledges Winston's intelligence. He seems at moments to admire him. He holds up 4 fingers and asks, "How many fingers am I holding up?" 4. More pain. "How many fingers?" 4. "I can't help it. 4. O'Brien wants Winston to genuinely see fire. Not to say fire. See fire. To see fire. To experience fire. To have the word "for" become meaningless when the party requires it to be meaningless. The philosophy of power, in one of the most remarkable passages in all of fiction, O'Brien explains the party's philosophy to Winston, not with cruelty, but with the genuine enthusiasm of a true believer explaining something beautiful. Winston asks, "What is the party fighting for? What is the goal? What does Oceania look like in 100 years? O'Brien describes it. A world in which there is no laughter, no love, no loyalty, no curiosity, only power and more power forever. Not human beings, animals. Not citizens, not subjects, instruments. A boot stamping on a human face forever. Why?" Winston asks, "What is the point? At least the old tyrants wanted something. Wealth, luxury, longevity. What does the party want from its absolute power?" O'Brien's answer is the coldest thing in the book. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The party doesn't want anything from its power except the power itself. It has discovered that power exercised purely and completely over another human being. The power to make them suffer, the power to make them deny reality, the power to make them love what destroys them, is in its own way a kind of perfection, not pleasure, not happiness, pure power. Winston tries to argue. He says the party will fail eventually. The proles will rise up. The human spirit cannot be forever crushed. History will defeat them. O'Brien listens calmly to all of it. Then he says, "You are the last humanist, Winston. We will cure you of that." Room 101, the physical torture eventually brings Winston close to a complete break, but he clings to one last thing, his love for Julia. They can make him say anything, he tells himself. They can make him believe anything. They cannot take what he feels. They cannot make him betray her in his heart. He is wrong. The door of room 101 is a legend in the Ministry of Love. Every prisoner knows about it. It contains, O'Brien explains with terrible simplicity, the worst thing in the world, and the worst thing is different for everyone. It is whatever you personally cannot endure. For Winston Smith, it is rats. He has always been afraid of rats. A deep, instinctive, almost animal terror of them. This was revealed probably in the conversations he and Julia had in the room above the shop. Conversations that were always being listened to. O'Brien brings in a wire cage. Inside are large gray rats. The cage is fitted with a mask that can be strapped to a person's face, designed so the rats will eat through the wearer's cheeks. O'Brien explains this very calmly. He begins to bring the cage toward Winston's face. And Winston Smith, who wrote in his diary that he would die rather than betray Julia, breaks. He screams, "Do it to Julia. Do it to Julia, not to me. I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off, strip her to the bones, not me, Julia." That is the end of Winston Smith, not his physical death that comes later off stage, but the person who existed before that moment, the person who dared to keep a diary, who dared to fall in love, who dared to say 2 + 2 = 4 in the face of everything. That person is gone. The party has reached inside him and removed the last thing that was his. The aftermath, the end of everything. And the worst last line in fiction, Winston is released. He is thin and broken, his hair white, his hands trembling. He is given a comfortable but meaningless government job, a sinecure that requires almost nothing of him. He spends his days at the Chestnut Tree Cafe, drinking Victory gin, doing occasional arithmetic puzzles in his mind, staring at nothing. He sees Julia once they meet by accident on a cold February day, walking in the park. Both of them are altered, older, grayer, somehow flattened. They stop and talk briefly without much warmth. Julia tells him that she betrayed him too. At the crucial moment she named his name. He tells her the same. They acknowledge it without either guilt or bitterness. It is simply what happened. There is no love left. There is not even much hatred. There's a kind of deadness that is worse than either. They part and do not see each other again. Winston sits in the cafe. The telescreen announces a great victory at the front. Oceania has repelled a massive Eurasian attack in Africa. The numbers are staggering. The triumph is total. And something happens in Winston's chest, a warmth of flooding joy. He had always known it. The battle was real, and the victory was real, and everything was right, and everything was good. He looks up at the enormous poster on the wall, the heavy, calm, protecting face, the dark eyes that follow you wherever you move. The last line of the novel, he loved Big Brother. What it all means 1984 is not just a story about a dystopian future. It is a philosophical argument about the nature of truth, memory, power, and identity. Here are the ideas that resonate most deeply. On truth. The novel argues that truth is not just a matter of facts. It depends on a shared human reality. If you can control what people remember, you control what is true. The most radical act of the party is not surveillance or torture. It is the destruction of objective reality itself. On memory. Memory is the ground of personal identity. Without the ability to remember, to say, this happened, and I was there, we become unmoored from ourselves. Winston's greatest act of heroism is simply refusing to forget. His greatest defeat is when he is made to forget. On love. Julia and Winston's affair is not just a romance, it is a political act. The party's suppression of sex and love is not about morality. It is about energy. Sexual desire, fulfilled and satisfied, makes people calm and private and self-contained, harder to inflame, harder to herd, harder to control. The party wants that energy directed outward, at rallies, at telescreens, at enemies. Love between two individuals is a private world the party cannot enter, so the party destroys it. On power. The book's most disturbing insight is that power, when exercised without limit or purpose, becomes its own end. The party has no program, no vision, no goal beyond its own continuation. It is the purest expression of power for power's sake, and Orwell argues terrifyingly that such a system, once established, could be stable forever. On language. Newspeak is perhaps Orwell's most enduring invention. The idea that language shapes thought, that reducing the number of words available reduces the range of ideas possible, is one that linguists still debate and politicians still exploit. Every time we see complex ideas compressed into slogans, every time nuance is squeezed out of public debate, every time a word is redefined to serve a political purpose, Orwell's ghost stirs. That matters today. Orwell wrote this novel in 1948, flipping the last two digits to make 1984 as a warning about the directions he saw the world heading. He had witnessed Stalin's purges, Hitler's propaganda machine, and the Spanish Civil War, where both sides distorted truth to serve their ends. He was writing about his present moment, dressed in the costume of a future that hadn't happened yet. He died in January 1950, 7 months after the book was published. He never saw how it would change the world. He used his words constantly. That's very Orwellian, meaning something is dishonestly bureaucratic, or language is being used to disguise oppression. Big Brother is watching, used whenever surveillance is discussed. Doublespeak or Newspeak, used when politicians or corporations use language to obscure rather than communicate thought police. Used whenever dissent is suppressed, memory hold. When information is deleted or suppressed, the book's warning is not about a specific pulse democracies might take. The warning is about any system that seeks to control reality rather than describe it. About any authority that tells you to distrust your own eyes and ears. About any power that treats the human capacity to think, feel, remember, and love as an enemy to be destroyed. It regenerates a real kind of slow degradation of shared truth and the world they live in, the surveillance technology in their pockets, the algorithms that curate their realities in real time, the slow degradation of shared truth in public discourse, and thinks, oh no. Oh no. Complete summary in paragraph 1984 is set in a totalitarian future where Winston Smith, a low-ranking member of the ruling party in Oceania, works at the Ministry of True Writing historical records to match whatever the party currently claims. Watched at all times by telescreens, living in poverty, forbidden to think independently, Winston begins a secret diary, his first act of rebellion. He falls in love with Julia, a fellow party worker, and the two of them begin a clandestine affair, eventually renting a room they believe is safe from surveillance. Convinced that a senior party official named O'Brien is secretly part of an underground resistance, they approach him and are apparently inducted into the Brotherhood, receiving a copy of Goldstein's forbidden manifesto. But O'Brien is not a rebel. He is a devoted party agent who has been watching Winston for years. The room above the shop was always being monitored. Winston and Julia are arrested. In the Ministry of Love, Winston is tortured for months by O'Brien himself, who seeks not just his confession but his genuine total conversion, his sincere love for Big Brother, through physical agony and psychological manipulation, and finally through the terror of Room 101, where his deepest fear is weaponized against him. Winston is broken completely. He betrays Julia in his heart, and the last thing that made him himself is destroyed, released and hollowed out. He spends his remaining days as a shell, until one day, hearing news of a great victory, he weeps with joy and love for Big Brother. The novel ends there, not with death, but with something worse: complete annihilation of a self.